Yeah, I want to talk to you about a little tool we've used this year, which was particularly relevant in the online learning world for gathering student feedback. So I'll dive right in. I suppose my question to you would be to set the scene. Which one of these would you be more likely to invest time in? Would you like to, as a customer or a student, a user of higher education, would you like to fill out lots of detailed questions, or a short, kind of snappy looking QR code to scan, or a link to click, or even an NFC tag? The idea is just really what we've done, and it's been developed really by Dr. Waleed, AlNuaimy in electrical engineering, myself. What we've done is just tried to find a way to gather student feedback in a more efficient way that can just let them do it in quite a quick way. You'll notice throughout this presentation, you'll see at the top right and the bottom right, there are two QR codes which you can scan yourself. It would be really great if some people could try the survey. I've added a couple of kind of fake questions in there about the football and the price of fish, just to give you something to click and select. It will take you about probably 20 seconds to do that. And then we can maybe have a look at how it looks like from the staff member's point of view when you're analysing the results. At the bottom right, you can also maybe later in the talk request more information if you'd like, using a similar brief survey where you leave your details. Okay, so just to set the scene again, Bishop wrote this in 2018. There is a need and value rather to foster and develop a culture of partnership between staff and students, and that's really what we are trying to do. Here's what the students would see in our little Google Forms survey, and really this is just something we had our student experience team send out once a week to the whole student cohort to allow them to give feedback on kind of generic types of activities. So it's not, it's quite an important point. It's not, a portal for them to moan about particular modules or staff or to, praise certain specific things. It's for them to give a very quick indication using smiley faces, as you can just see peeking up at the bottom of the screen there, about specific, non-specific activity types. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So really, another name for this would be a 360-degree feedback tracker. The idea is that we're able to garner student feedback while it's still relevant to them. So prior to the National Student Survey, when really, if you think about it, the National Student Survey is always giving you the opinions of students who have now left. And what we want to do is just to try in small ways to address pain points that students might be experiencing while they're still a student in the department. And this became particularly relevant in remote learning because it felt that this was actually addressing a need. I'm sure many of you have had students say to you that, they felt reluctant to speak up on a big Microsoft Teams meeting, perhaps a tutorial that you were running. It's very difficult in an online world to have a one-to-one conversation or to be heard if you're not the kind of person who is comfortable just speaking up in front of 50 or 30 or 100 other people. So this gave them a different avenue. But we also are now working on rolling this out with feedback pods that are physical. For example, an iPad have strategic locations in the department. And as I say, we'll hope to continue sending out weekly survey links as well to the students. So it's a very simple survey tool, quick and easy for the students, and it's anonymous unless they choose to leave their details. The idea of this is that it does need to be administered by the student experience team because they need to send out the emails. For this year, it tended to fall on me to then analyze the results, and that's an issue that brings up the importance of departmental buy-in. So although this is, and I'll show you in a moment, is a very simple thing to implement, it's really important that you lay the correct groundwork for something like this. If you're thinking of setting up something similar in your own department, you do need ethical approval, especially as in this case, it was a department-wide survey. We laid the foundations for that the year before, and you really need departmental buy-in, because clearly there could be misperceptions about how this could be used. It's important that the head of department in our case was on board with this, and that senior staff were involved. So, for example, the chair of the Staff Student Liaison Committee was involved, so that they could use this feedback to perhaps set the scene for some of their committee meetings, instead of relying on students to bring ad hoc issues to the meeting. All were aware of perhaps general issues in advance, and it's also essential that staff are aware that it's not there to kind of monitor their individual performance or anything like that. So as I've mentioned a lot of the how really in the previous, as I talked over the previous slide, so I won't go over that again, but some statistics from our two departments, electrical engineering and computer science. We, over the year, had about more than 400 responses from students. Whenever there's an email drop from the student experience team, you tend to get a spike, obviously, in responses. And actually, amazingly, around 200 of them chose to leave free text responses. One of the challenges is how to handle those. And that's where having senior staff on board in the department is important, because they may need to sensitively triage feedback that students have left, which may be more specific than we wanted it to be. And 50 or more students requested then further contact on the issue that they'd written about. So in terms of the how, I'm just going to quickly jump to this. Really, it's very simple. You just, this is not rocket science. You just set up your own Google Drive account for the department or for this initiative. You can create a new form, and I'm sure many of you have done this before. And if you kind of scan the other QR code to show your interest, then I'm happy to send you a bit more of a guide, a few departments to send that to, about the specifics of how, for example, you can embed the smiley faces. We chose Google Forms because these smiley faces are actually remarkably difficult to implement in other survey providers. Once you've done this, obviously, here we've got a couple of surveys just from people who've been in the meeting today. So, we can see out of the three, there was an equal split of what they chose to feedback about and how their experience was. And we can see here that the blue corresponds to a very positive experience, or the red to not quite as good, and so on and so forth. And then, obviously, those of you who've used forms, you can then create a spreadsheet. One of the beauties of this approach is that you can see now the individual responses, so you can start to analyze. Someone chose to feedback on the football and it's coming home, but then what you can also do is you can clear the responses from your form, and you might think, oh no, it's going to clear everything, but it only clears the graphics and the instant analytics there. It doesn't clear this spreadsheet, and obviously you can download this and manipulate it. So it's just a little intro to how that works. As I say, if you're someone who you'd actually like to request more information, just at any point scan the bottom right QR code. Really, the main work of the Smiley project is in managing it, as I'm sure you can imagine. So, this is an idealized workflow that I came up with early in the project, where we need to gather information weekly, analyze it weekly, triage some of the requests for further contact that some students made who chose not to be anonymous. You need to review and you need to report back both to the department and then feedback to students. And this is a cycle that then gives us our 360 degrees. And there are various potential pitfalls with that. But first, just to give you an idea, here's, obviously, I'm going to show you the positive comments from the first few weeks in electrical engineering. You could see, just looking at these, that instantly there was quite a lot of discussion of face-to-face, the need for face-to-face contact. Students were really feeling it as they began their year, and you can see that comes out in this kind of word wall here. And again, these are just positive comments very early on. But if we wanted to look at some more in-depth results very quickly, then you can do all kinds of analytics with your Excel skills. So using pivot tables or other ways. And again, this is something that I'm trying to develop guides for now. But here we can see hopefully just about that on the right, the key is the different types of activity. So this is just a breakdown literally of the feedback that students chose to select when they selected those different options. You can see that most of it was about virtual learning this year. And a distant second actually was labs experience. Because obviously students, that's a big issue for students in a virtual world. If they get the opportunity to come into the lab, you could analyze it other ways as well. So this is just the ratings. 5 is very poor, and the white one is very good, and then the green is marginally good, and so on and so forth. And you can see that this varied through the year in our department, but things became probably worse around this period, and then started to come back up towards the end as we started to understand the issues they were facing. And finally, here we have, this is about virtual learning activities, because that was the biggest area of feedback. You can see that students were happy at first, they became less happy in the middle, and then the green here, the light green, shows that they were, some students were starting to feel better about virtual learning by the end. Again, we'd like to think in response to what we've done. I'm aware of time, so just to wrap up, as I've mentioned, managing the feedback is quite a bit of work. You can see that quite a bit of work needs to go into reporting the data to the department or triaging specific student requests for responses. And this isn't a substitute for the National Student Survey. It's more of a little sister, really, to try and assist us in preparing for the National Student Survey. And here's some examples of issues that were partly affected by this feedback initiative in our department. The challenges, as I've implied, are, I think, and something I'm working on at the moment, is developing some templates really for so that this is easy to implement for someone who may not be as invested in it as I am. And for our student experience teams to be able to do perhaps more of the triaging of issues and the analysis even. It's important to avoid impact dilution. So it's really important that, and this is something we're working on, that we're able to set up this you said, we did style feedback loop where we can actually tell students what we've done. And opportunities, I just highlight here survey fatigue. What we've seen is a lot of interest actually from other departments to roll this out, and that is fine provided it's implemented at a local department level, because each student will only ever hear one survey from their department. It can be also deployed in, for example, professional services context very easily, as I'm sure you can see. But some thought needs to go into that to avoid overlap, so that the same student isn't being bombarded with different survey requests from different sources. And you can see here's some next steps of things we'd like to do. One thing we've started to do is implement this in wider contexts, such as recruitment events or external visitor events, and as I say, those physical feedback pods. So that's it really. I hope I've been on time. Thank you. If you'd like to find out a bit more, just scan this QR code at the bottom right.